Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the Backyard Banter podcast. My name is Matt Harmon. If you've been listening to this show so far, I, for one, really appreciate your interest and really excited about the way the series is going. We've had so many good guests on, and today we have another great guest. Before we get to him, I have to tell you that this podcast is sponsored by RealitySportsOnline.com, a powerful fantasy platform that lets you manage your fantasy team like a real-life general manager. Use the promo code BYB10 for a 10% off the platform fee when you sign up. That's BYB followed by the numerals 1 and 0. So we're here on episode 12 today, and we've got a really good guest today, somebody with definitely an interesting perspective, someone that we haven't really talked to this sort of person so far. It's a good friend of mine in the industry, Adam Pfeifer. How are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing good, Matt. Appreciate you having me on. Yeah, I've been listening to the podcast a lot. It's been, like you talked about, from someone with my perspective on it, it's really cool to watch you talk to some of the bigger names in the industry. I saw you had, obviously you had Matthew Berry, you had Liz Losa. It was a good episode. So it's really cool to see that from my perspective. And really for anybody, whether you're, just a casual fantasy guy or someone who's trying to make it in this industry or someone who's already in the industry, to see where kind of, which differ, where you differ in your path to get there. So, I think it's like, everybody does a, podcast on, fantasy football week 1, fantasy football season, fantasy football DFS. But I thought this was really interesting. And, I tweeted out a lot because it's something that I kind of like can relate to very easily. And I thought it kind of hit home for me. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely, and I appreciate that. It's very kind, and everybody, the interest in the series has been kind of mind-blowing to me. I figured like a few people that were like interested in, writing about football would like it, but it seems to be hitting home for a lot of people, so that makes me happy. And as far as your perspective, Adam, like one thing that I had a lot of people actually ask me was to kind of bring on sort of a younger writer that's kind of like quote unquote in progress in making it, and you were somebody that came to my mind. Like, I've been on your podcast before. I think we actually both wrote for Sportable back in the day with Sal Stefanali. So, like, kind of on the same. And you're also the only guest so far that's younger than me, I think. So, so that makes you stand out right away. But so I kind of want to get your perspective on that. Before we get to that, I always ask the guests to start off like, so how did you kind of come to fall in love and get obsessed with, football and fantasy sports in general? Give us a little bit of your background there.
For many people who see that I'm a Bills fan, I was born in upstate New York, about, maybe an hour or so from Buffalo. And growing up, I had, 2 older brothers, and pretty much I still do it to this day with my oldest brother. I kind of tried to really just follow whatever they did. Right. I was the youngest of 3. So I was kind of just the copycat, and I always wanted to do what they did. And with my dad, it was a football for a lot. And I remember we would always go to the Bills training camps. We would always go to some of the games. So that was immediately like, and my family, sports was just everywhere. It was with my dad, my grandparents, my brothers, uncles, aunts, everything. So immediately that was something that was, right away, something that I was kind of born into. And then it was around, I was probably 10 years old, I would say. And obviously my 2 older brothers are a good 6-7 years older than me. So they were doing this thing. It was, it was called fantasy football with my dad. And I thought it was the coolest thing. And I was too young at the time to kind of know exactly what was going on. I didn't know really any of the players. So not knowing it at the time, I was bugging my dad. No, can I be in this with you guys? Can I be in this, guys? And had I have known, I would have really called my dad out. But what he did was he got the list of just the most awful free agents on the waiver wire, right? Terrible guys. And I remember 2 players that were on my team. Here's some names for you guys. Chris Winkie was my starting quarterback because my dad was like, here, take Chris Winkie. Dude played like 6 games in 2002. On the Panthers. So I was like, oh, I got a quarterback. This is awesome. Chris Winkie, And then I think my running back was like Olandis Gary. I had like Peerless Price, who is the GOAT, but we'll get to that another day. But I thought it was the coolest thing. So immediately that's when I realized I was like, this is something that is really cool. And then when I got older, I was really into the sports video games like the Maddens and stuff like that. And I'd always do the fantasy draft option on the season mode. That that to me was like the second coolest thing ever. I could have anybody I wanted. So I've always played fantasy. So I guess that's how I kind of started to get into the actual like idea and aspect of fantasy football. And then in terms of writing, I don't know if you wanted me to go straight into that or not, but that was
Well,
that was how I got into football and fantasy in general, I would say.
it's funny, like you're not the first person that's brought up like the Madden aspect of it, and like I don't play Madden at all anymore,
Oh,
which
I
is
don't
weird
anymore. It's
because
it's hot garbage now.
oh, I don't even know. I have. It's been like I think it was 3 years ago was the last time I bought the game. I don't even remember who's on the cover now, but uh, yeah, it was funny because that was a big part of like my obsession with football too. Like I remember when I did, because like growing up, I didn't really care. Like we were just talking about this before we got on the podcast. Like I don't even consider myself a big sports fan. Like I love football, obviously, but like I don't care at all about any other sports. And like you can fight me on Twitter about that all you want, but it's just not something I'm interested in.
Yeah, Matt Harmon,
And
by the way, guys, he hates the U.S. Olympic team. Unless it's football somehow.
well,
So
I mean, listen, if there is a sporting event and there's adult beverages involved, I'll probably care.
there you go.
Especially if it's for the country. I mean, I got up for like the World Cup and stuff like that, but like
Yeah,
it's big events like that. I mean, come on, I am a patriot. Let's give me a break. But
I have a soul.
yeah, well, actually, that's a whole other topic. That's a whole other topic for our politics segment of the podcast. But
Oh God.
oh, that would be great. I would lose all my listeners. I'm probably losing them all right now. But I think that yeah, so it's just really funny that the Madden thing I think is actually probably going to be a big part for like a lot of guys that are kind of close to our age because Josh Norris brought it up. Like I don't know if you feel the same way, but what he said was and is very true. Like to my experience too. Like people would walk through the living room and be like, "Are you ever going to actually play the game? Because you spend so
Yeah.
much time doing the
What I
fantasy
would do
drafts."
is I do this. I used to do this in the NBA games. Sorry, I didn't mean to swear on this podcast. NBA,
No,
sorry. No,
it does have the explicit tag just in case.
no, but like I would just draft a team or just what I would love to do, and I still love to do this, is just rebuild the really crappy teams, right? Like
Yes.
let's rebuild teams and then simulate like 3 years into the future, do the draft, do the free agency, and by the time I'm done, I'm like, I don't really want to play anymore. And then I'll just get lost in it, and I'll be like, oh, let's do this team, let's do this team. So it's just the entire general manager kind of philosophy. Like I think I always thought that'd be like one of the coolest jobs to have ever, right? Like just manage players. Oh, I want to trade this guy. All right, let's trade this guy. I want to sign it. I just thought it was like I always kind of envisioned, especially after watching the movie Moneyball. I don't know if you ever seen that movie.
I am not.
Just like sitting at your desk with a nice computer, having like the roster in front of you, and just putting together a team. I just thought it was like the coolest concept, and I think that ties into fantasy football and fantasy sports pretty immensely.
Yeah, I would always try to like have a really stacked team and then like a really terrible quarterback, like try to take Terrell Pryor to the Super Bowl, stuff like that. That was always my favorite. And then eventually like trade every single draft pick I had to get like one of the best quarterbacks that came out in the draft. That was always my bad strategy. I could go on and on, but it's funny now. Like, yeah, I have just no interest in playing the game. I mean, I don't really play video games at all anymore,
Right.
and unless it's Mario Kart. But as we talked about a couple podcasts ago, so yeah, Adam, I think that's like that's a story that's very indicative of like I said, like guys you and I are your age and my age that they kind of come towards loving football and everything like that. So how did you then like first get into writing?
So when I was, I want to say sixth grade, I don't do it nearly as much now, but I used to read, and I just used to read books all the time. We had this thing in my elementary schools. I think it was called the accelerated reading program, where you would read so many books and you would just get these points for it or whatever. And then through that, I was like, this is kind of a good way to kind of escape from stuff. So from that, I was probably, like I said, sixth grade, and I would just start writing short stories about anything, like superhero stuff or anything that came to my mind. I just write short stories, and It was something that I don't do anymore, obviously, but it was something that really kind of played a huge role in that. And then from there, I knew English was like my favorite subject. Like math, my mom would, when I would get a report card in math and it was a D plus or a C minus, my mom would be like, "This is going on the fridge." Like this,
Yeah.
good job. So English was definitely my strong suit. So I would take these creative writing classes in high school, and I would take like the elite, or wow, I said elite, like the Joe Flacco English classes, and it was something that kind of came natural to me, like writing essays. I would, a lot of people would procrastinate, and I would kind of just like to do it right away, while the ideas were fresh. So from there, when I graduated high school in 2011, so yeah, I'm that young. Um,
Well,
I
you're 2 years younger than me for full
yeah,
disclosure
so
to the audience.
yeah, so I'm 23. I actually just turned 23 like 2 weeks ago. But so I was thinking, like, after high school, I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to involve sports, and I knew I wanted to involve writing. So you put the two together, you get sports writing, and that's probably the knowledge of my math, right? That's the extent of my math skills. So um, I was really interested, and it's funny because I didn't start anywhere near fantasy sports. I used to, my first position writing, it wasn't paid or anything really. It was just a independent blog to cover the Philadelphia Flyers for hockey, and I thought it was the coolest thing. I would, just write about whatever I wanted for hockey. And then I moved from that site to another site called Rant Sports, where I first started doing fantasy, and I was still doing hockey stuff there. And then I emailed one of the content producers, and I straight up
I'm
asked, like,
actually I'm actually going to cut you off and jump you back to that first part of your story
yeah, go
there.
ahead.
How did you first get like, just because I think this is probably the point of the podcast, like how did that first
Right.
position, unpaid sort of position with the hockey site come about?
Twitter. Twitter, I'm sure people have talked about it, it's gonna continue to be monumental for people trying to write, and it has been for me. So I saw a kid who was actually like 2 or 3 years younger than me at the time. And he was on this website covering the Flyers, and I was like, wow, this guy's 2 or 3 young. I think I could do this as well. So I tweeted him, and I said, hey, I'm interested in writing about the Flyers. I see you write for the website. Is there anybody you can put me in contact with to kind of get a position here? And he sent me the email to send, and I guess they liked my stuff, and I started from there. But really, like, again, this was a couple years ago, so Twitter was like, even Twitter's got to be even bigger now. So Twitter's definitely been something that's really helped, and that's how I kind of got in touch with that site. And then from there, I saw people on Twitter writing for these other sites, and I thought, these sites probably get a little bit more exposure, so I'd reach out to them as well. And for the other website called Rant Sports that I used to write for, I would tweet the content producer there, and he would hook me up with an email. And this was, I believe, it was the second time I had to provide a writing sample. So, I guess they liked my stuff. And then I was strictly a hockey guy from that time. I was, writing about the Flyers, and sometimes I'd write about other hockey teams. And then I just randomly thought, I saw people on Twitter, because when I first got Twitter, it was to follow, because I used to watch Fantasy Football Now, the show Matthew Berry's on. I believe that's what it's called. And the reason I made Twitter was to follow all these fantasy guys. It's the first. I was actually looking at my Twitter history the other day. The first person I followed on Twitter was Matthew Berry, and then it was followed by a bunch of other fantasy guys. So that's why I actually made the Twitter. And from there, I didn't know it was gonna help me do what I do today. Not that I'm anywhere near where I want to be, but yeah, that's how I got in contact with the website Rant Sports. And I straight up emailed one of the content producers. I said, is there anything else I can do? Am I allowed to do other stuff? I thought I was just strictly hockey. And he said, yeah, you can do whatever you want. And that's when I was like, all right, hockey, I still love hockey to this day, but there was just so much more free roam with fantasy, so much more opinionated stuff you can do with fantasy, so much, hockey, you can have some opinions in there, but a lot of it's straightforward because there's no, theories behind hockey. There's no, research and invested data and stuff like that. So from there, I would just write and write and write and write. And I kind of got a little bit tired of that website, I guess is a polite way to put it. Don't
Mm.
really want to get too much into that, but from there, I got in contact with Nick Radicano from Project Roto and Ryan Hodge, and I was a kind of I was in contact with them a little bit on Twitter, like here and there, just chiming into conversations. And Nick was starting up the website Project Roto, and it was a pretty good time because he was just starting the website, and I said, hey, I'm looking to keep writing about fantasy sports. The reason I left the other site, and I should probably mention this, the site was not like a strictly fantasy website, obviously, because I was writing about hockey as well. So I wanted to go somewhere where fantasy was the focal point and the headlight and the headline. I'm sorry. So that's what I really wanted to do. So that's why I got in contact with Nick and Ryan, and they've been really really helpful for me. Just they always we're looking out to share my stuff, and things have been really good. I mean, I still write for them now. I mean, the podcast that you mentioned earlier is I still did the I started Project Podcast was the name of it, and we had you on, I think Mondays or Tuesdays, and we kind of just
Yeah,
talked
Tuesdays.
about yeah, we talked about Tyrod Taylor for about 45 minutes, and then just whatever games were on that week for the remaining 15.
We spend at least like the first 30 minutes of every podcast either talking about Cam Newton or Tyrod Taylor. So
Yeah, and that shouldn't be surprise. Anybody who follows me should not be a surprise. But yeah, from there, I did that for, I think this will be my third year. I'm still with them doing just that was for seasonal. And like many people, the DFS kind of daily fantasy kind of, I started to get really, really interested in that because obviously for seasonal, you're not going to sit there and write, hey, start Aaron Rodgers. Hey, start Antonio Brown. But in daily fantasy, you can because you're obviously paying a salary for them, and whether you think they warrant that salary or not. So I really wanted to get in DFS because it allowed me to kind of write a different way than seasonal. Plus, I was so interested in working with so many of the top DFS guys. Al Smizzle, Al Zeidenfeld for starters, who I guess I'll say I write for now for DFS Bootcamp. That's when I messaged. It's just Twitter again. I saw Al followed me on Twitter, and I saw he was starting up another website called dfsbootcamp.com, and it was going to have a lot of people. Nick Mencio of Roto World does some stuff there. CJ Kaltenbach, who I do the podcast with, does stuff there. So I guess it was a combination of Twitter being such an easy kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I guess contact platform, to reach out to guys with a quick, direct message or a quick tweet. And I guess the other part was timing. I picked up two websites that were just starting and may or may not have needed writers. And I think you talked about this with I forget who was. I think it was Matt Franchise.
mhm.
He was talking about how just showing interest alone is something that can be really, really admirable and kind of intriguing for a site, right?
Mhm.
Like sites are going to want writers that want to write for the site. I mean, it's kind of common sense, but that's kind of how I got to where I am. And right now I'm still doing DFS work for pretty much baseball, basketball, and football for boot camp. And I'm still doing the process podcast, which has been like incredible. Like it's been probably one of the more entertaining and fun things I've done since I've started writing and doing fantasy sports because people for the first time, like people are actually like tweeting me like when's the podcast coming up. Like it's a cool feeling, and to see that people actually want to see your content. So I looked on iTunes the other day, for instance. I think we're like in the top 100 for sports and recreation podcasts, which is like crazy. I thought, and we just started it like during almost like the halfway point of the NBA season. So but yeah, that's kind of where I am right now. And granted, I'm not near where I want to be yet either. I mean, I'm this isn't a full-time gig or anything, but so many people have helped me, and I think that Twitter again, like Twitter is how I got in contact with so many people and that have helped me. Like I can't even begin to name them all, but yeah,
Right.
I guess that's kind of how I got to where I am right now, and I'm still looking to keep going. I mean, I'm not trying to be content right now with anything.
Well, I think there's a couple really important points that for the audience to take away from your story there, and one of them, of course, and it's something that we've talked about a lot, is like continuing to put yourself out there. Like that, there was one theme from every opportunity that you took there. It was like you reached out to the people, you know, because that's one thing that
It got to a point where I was literally emailing people and messaging people, and each like beginning sentence would start with, "Hey, I apologize if I'm being a nuisance." Like it got to that point, but sometimes that's really what you have to do because a lot of people just get a lot of emails. A lot of people just a lot of people will just click on the reply button, go look at something else, and all of a sudden it's in their spam or whatever, or not in their spam, it's in their red, and it's not showing up.
that's
Yeah,
me. That is so me.
But yeah,
I always try to, like, if I get a response from somebody that like is, you know, important or whatever, like wants to have me on their podcast, or somebody that like somebody that's one of my readers, like, or listeners to this podcast, to reach out to me, I always star it to remember, like I will go back to it eventually. But sometimes like a week will go by and I'll be like, oh damn, I forgot. Yeah. So, but that's important though, because, and I kind of want to have you keep talking on that, because it's really important, because I am the type of person that I get really like, I'm very aware of the fact that I might be being annoying, and like I said in a few episodes ago, like luckily that it didn't really hinder me from getting to where I am, but like it's hard because it could have, you know, like if it had come down to it with the NFL job, like I would have definitely stopped trying if I had felt that I was being annoying. So it's important that people take away from your story that like you have kind of, even though you were aware that it might be a thing, like you didn't let it hinder you.
Yeah. And like in the back of my mind, I definitely thought that a lot, but I guess I was just so passionate about the stuff that I wanted to pursue. I just kind of didn't care almost, and kind of threw it to the side. Um, but yeah, like it's really interesting because like I let's see, I've probably been doing writing and stuff for about 5 years now. That doesn't seem like a lot, but I guess because I started so young, it almost kind of does. So yeah,
It's
it's
longer than
been
I've been doing it.
yeah, like it's been fun. And I mean, another thing I that's really been a huge part was because writing is definitely like a coping thing. I've talked about it, and I don't mind talking about it. I have anxiety, like really pretty bad anxiety. I'm on medication, stuff like that for it. So that alone is like I'm sure you can relate to this. When you're like knee deep in statistics and metrics and tape and film and studies, that's all you're thinking about at that time, especially while you're writing about it. So to get that kind of stuff, that whatever you're anxious about, out of your head for an hour or 30 minutes, it helps. It's coping. So that's something that I've actually really had help me as well. So that's another
Yeah,
thing.
I think that's been kind of another theme that people don't, people kind of come to this, and myself included, in like times of, you know, maybe personal turmoil, or it does become a very therapeutic thing. And so what I would encourage people out there, like if they have an interest in writing, or you know, covering sports in general, even if it's not about sports and you just want, like, even if you're not a writer but you have some interest in potentially having, you know, because I think you and I, Adam, like, you know, we like to write. You know, if we weren't writing about football, we'd be writing about something else.
Oh,
Um,
100%. Like I would be writing
yeah,
about, if it wasn't sports, if there was no such thing as sports, God forbid, that would have been, I mean, whew. But if there was no such thing as sports, I would be writing about movies, video games,
right.
something. I'd be writing about something 100%. It's just like, it's not even a question.
And I'd be writing about feelings and plants, apparently, according to my
And
according
dogs.
and dogs, plants, and feelings. That's so that kind of lets you know what kind of person I am.
Dogs,
But
plants, and feelings. It sounds like a poetry show, right? Like something
yeah,
like
I don't know why I don't have a girlfriend. I can't believe it. No, but I
dude,
think
it's
that,
all right, man. I'm single too. Don't worry about it.
oh, happy about it too. I can't imagine. I mentioned this on the last podcast with Mark when he was like, "Oh, well, we can hook, you know, we can find somebody else for him." Like, no, trust me, you don't want to do that. That would be a disaster for all parties
I
involved.
will say though, you have the easiest like conversation starter in the world, probably laying down somewhere around your house. in Charlotte.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, he's a big help. I mean, dogs are dogs are definitely a good wingman for sure. I thought you were talking about my job, just to spin it back to that, because that's not a good conversation
Oh yeah,
starter.
I don't think your job's laying around the house. That'd be
Well,
weird.
no, yeah, but I mean, like sometimes depends on the day. But it's funny because, and this is just a funny little side story. Like I always, people say like, "Oh, that must be great!" Like to tell girls like when you're out at a bar or whatever, like that you work for the NFL. I'm like, no, because it either goes into one of two things. One, it'll go into, oh, can you get me to meet players? Which
Right.
no, I can't. And also that does me no good. And two, it'll go into like me actually telling them what I do, which makes me sound like like a gigantic dork and not appealing at all in any way. So actually, that is not a good asset. I just want to make that clear to people involved that it's not a high profile celebrity sort of thing. But Adam, I kind of want to somehow get back to whatever we were talking about before. About like writing and everything like that. Like, so if you are kind of in sort of a personal, I don't want to say crisis, but in some sort of like there's some turmoil going on, it can be incredibly therapeutic just to write about anything. And also, I think that really does also inform your writing about sports. So have you ever found that somehow just your writing background or the way you communicate ideas has ever sort of also infused with the way that you communicate about fantasy sports or sports in general?
Yeah, so you talked about writing being therapeutic, and it's insanely accurate. Like I talked about how I would go. I would, and I still to this day see a therapist for anxiety. I go like once a month. But writing stuff down on paper alone is really therapeutic, and especially for someone with anxiety, because a lot of people with anxiety have these thoughts in their head, and it's like these thoughts that they can seem so terrifying, so scary. But if you just write down, literally and like physically write down on a piece of paper, just you know anything that you're thinking that'll make you feel better, it really does help. And then what was the question in terms of fantasy football? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just like the way you write about kind of other things or that experience of communicating ideas through through your own therapeutic means. Do you think that ever like informs your sports writing in any way?
Um, I mean, when I do my writing, I love to start my articles with like kind of like a really quick like 3 to 4 word sentence that just gets somebody's attention. And a lot of times I'll tie it in with anxiety, like the way I feel with anxiety sometimes is very not easy, I should say, but very interesting, and it helps me kind of write better because I have all these feelings and thoughts, right? And it's like, okay, that on paper, that on on an article would really kind of just kind of make the reader know exactly how you feel. And it's hard to kind of do that otherwise. Like if I didn't have anxiety or anything and I was trying to convey how I would feel if I was anxious, it'd be incredibly hard, obviously. So
Right.
I think the fact that I do have the anxiety and stuff like that, it kind of makes it really easier to, like I said, convey that and tie it in with your writing.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I really appreciate you sharing that perspective.
Yeah.
That takes I don't know. I mean, I'm I've alluded to it several times in the podcast that I don't like to talk. I'm not comfortable talking about that publicly, so I appreciate or talking about that sort of stuff publicly and all that sort of whatever goes into that. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective. That's pretty cool. One other thing I want to hit back on from your earlier story was the sort of, you mentioned like you're very passionate. And I think that that is super important for websites to see when you do approach them because, I think, like, let's just be brutally honest here. A lot of websites, especially smaller ones that, aren't paying people a full-time salary, are making kind of a living based on your passion because they can't compensate writers. A lot of sites can't compensate writers to like a full-time basis or the incentive is never money, even in this business, even if you're full-time. The money is never the big incentive. It's about your passion and channeling your passion. And I think that right, sites need to see that, because if you lose that passion, then they lose you, then they lose an asset. So how do you keep that passion though? Because like you mentioned, you've been doing this for 5 years. That's quite a long time. Like we had Eric Stoner on the sixth episode, and he mentioned like he's just realizing that he's passionate about this, but not to the point that he ever wants to make it a career. So how do you like you kind of differ in that perspective, and you're still chasing that? What keeps driving you to do that?
Honestly, again, just people that I've worked with, and like, for instance, you getting to the position you're at NFL.com. That stuff is not something that you should look at and be jealous about by any means. It should be legitimately something to inspire you, right? So when I see people that I've worked with in the industry, like yourself, Heath Cummings, who I think like is about a year or so with CBS Sports now.
Yep.
Um, when I
Former
see
another former football guy's staffer.
Yeah, well, he's a great guy. I've done stuff with him, and I believe Mike Clay was just recently full time for ESPN. So when I see people people get to where they need to be and where they want to be, that to me is, first of all, it's just awesome to watch. And second, that because I'm so young, like I do think I have plenty of time. So like when I see that, it just inspires me and it kind of motivates me to just keep doing what I'm doing because it's working for other people. Why can't it work for me? And not to say that like, oh, I'm the greatest writer, the greatest podcast or the greatest fantasy mind ever. No, I'm not even close. But that to me is just something that I have always seen. It's like, okay, when I see, for instance, Matt Harmon just got hired by NFL.com, I want to go write an article right now. Like that's kind of how I feel. So I think that's important to kind of look at and see that, this isn't like, yeah, it's a dream job, but it doesn't mean it's like only like a dream job. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not just going to be something you dream about and then you wake up and you can't have it.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that is really important because it is it's a competitive field in the sense that there are only a few spots, for
But you really wouldn't know it by like
no.
reactions on Twitter and community. Like it really, you would not even think it was competitive, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's kind of how I mean that it's competitive, but it's also not. In that, yeah, really, people that are very supportive about pumping each other up. Most people are. I would say there are definitely some that are not, and that sucks. Like that's not cool, and you shouldn't be that way. But because there are only a few spots, and like it's important to be inspired by other people getting opportunities. So I think that is a very good point. And I think that it's hard to stay motivated though, like especially on a daily, like in season and stuff like that. Especially is the hardest time for me to continue to pump out content and everything. And like when you're kind of like, all right, it's week 15, I've said the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
That can be hard. What are some things that like you mentioned, just continuing to stay hungry? What are some things, like some tactics or anything that you would convey to the audience that kind of help you stay that way?
I definitely think podcasting has helped. When I
Yeah.
first started, I was strictly writing, and I would always listen to sports radio and stuff like that, and I thought, hey, that'd be a pretty cool job. But podcasting lets you, like you talked about your week 15, you're saying kind of the same things over and over again, but podcasting allows you to say it in a different way. So you're not just saying, you can only write so much and have the reader kind of, decipher exactly what you're trying to say. But if you're talking on a podcast, I mean, I've gotten to the point now where like I'm always looking to do podcasts. I think it's probably one of my favorite things to do, just in terms of everything. It's it's really something that you can use to, like I said, you don't have say it's week 15 in the NFL, talk about something else, talk about anything because like you said, and with this podcast, your podcast, right? It's something unique and like a lot of people are gonna write, and I do it too, and I do it, and but I also do other stuff as well. I don't like to kind of write like some people will write maybe 3 to 4 sentences on why you should start a player. I think that like that literally drives me insane when I do it. I have to write like I have to go in depth as much as possible, and sometimes that can be bad because you don't want to just write to write. But I think podcasting going back to that has really helped me kind of stay hungry, and because there's so many more avenues with podcasting on top of writing. So like you have, the Sirius XM, like for instance, the Fantasy Insiders guys. I'm not sure if you follow them, but Dan Strafford and Dave Lochran just got announced that they're going to be doing a Sirius show. I think Wednesday nights. Like there's different avenues other than just writing in this industry, and I think that's something that you got to kind of keep in the back of your mind in case like one day you're just not, you just got writer's block, or you're not being able to put the words together, something like that.
Yeah, and there's so many ways to do that without like even being super serious about it. Like you don't need to have your own podcast like with your own professional sounding microphone, or an iTunes show or anything like that. Like you can just do like we're doing right now to record this. Like just do a Google Hangout with yourself and just talk, and or get one of your friends on, get some other writer that and just talk about football for like an hour, or talk about fantasy or whatever. It really does help kind of get the mind flowing. And like I used to do a show with Leo Howell 2 seasons ago, Fantasy Game Plan podcast, and I'm sure like 20 people listen to that ever, but I still found it like really helpful to talk about my ideas and like just shoot them back and forth with another person. I think it's really easy, and it helps you too. Like it's important to be well-rounded. Like Adam, I'm sure that people know that you do podcasts and you write. That makes you much more marketable than just a writer or just a podcaster, because they can get as much out of you as possible.
Yeah, and it's kind of like almost hypocritical because I'm not on camera right now, but for some reason we talked about this before the show, like my webcam isn't working, but like video as well. And I myself want to do a lot more video, because it's like, you check off all the boxes, right? You write, you podcast, you do video. So obviously I sound like an idiot saying that while I'm in a black screen, but I think like you kind of want to be like a 5-tool player, you kind of want to give them a little bit of everything. And am I there yet? No, I don't think so. But it's something that I've really thought about, and something that's important, because it's not easy to just sit in front of a camera and talk. It's not easy to, it's gotten easier, but it's when I first did a podcast, I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what? Like, it's not as easy as it looks. Like, oh, you're just talking. Yeah, but there's other things that play into that. So it really isn't as easy. But again, I do think it's important to kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, my first podcast, I was super nervous, and I mean that was like 2 years ago now. Obviously I've talked my ass off since then, but it's funny. It's nervous. It's nerve-wracking a little bit, but you get used to it, and practice really is the only way that helps. And
yeah, dude, I talk my ass off too. Don't worry about it. I talk way too much. Like you can even ask CJ, who I do the podcast with at boot camp. Like I probably talk a little too much.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I was emailing back, and I'm going to go on RotoViz Radio later today, and I was emailing back and forth with John Moore. We had the show like scheduled like a month ago, and he asked, I've been on so many podcasts between that time. He's like, you still want to record tonight, or are you all podcast out? I'm like, nah, man, I never stop talking. I always got more to say. But it is good to have that sort of practice. Like we talked about this with Matthew Berry. Like I've been doing, I need to do another one again of those like Periscope things, just to like get used to talking and do it.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that. I think that's interesting as well, because not only are you practicing talking in front of a camera, but you're literally interacting right then and there to the question.
It's like very rapid fire, and
yeah,
like,
I haven't done it yet, but maybe I mean,
it's cool.
For me, the thing that I think about is no one wants to see some 23-year-old dork talking to camera. Hey, do you think Cam Newton's good at football? Like, yeah. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, I thought the same thing, and then like 80 or 70 some people showed up, and like I was getting questions left and right. And
yeah,
well,
in fairness to them, they probably thought Charlie was on it.
I did make sure he was being a little bit of a diva that day, and like was kind of like laying by the window, and I was like, bro, I promised appearance. I made sure to get him on.
Bro, you gotta give me something here.
He's tough to work with. I did get him on camera a couple times, but that is true. Charlie is big for the hashtag brand. And another thing too, like you just mentioned, like trying new things, and obviously this is kind of like a unique experience for me working at NFL. But like the first time I went on Dave Dameshek's show, and I did it 3 times this season.
Yeah, I watched that.
Yeah, they were all, like video recorded. But the first time I went up there, I had no idea that it was going to be on camera. And
Mm.
like I sat down and I'm like, all of a sudden they start prepping the like not headset mic and start turning on the cameras. I'm like, wait, what the hell is this? Like, and he's like, no, it's video. And I was like, oh, shit, no one told me. And that was a whole different experience. But it was really good to get comfortable doing that. And now I feel a little bit better about like, all right, I know where to look and things like that. So my point in saying that is just like trying new things, and being adept at multiple different things. And speaking of trying new things, have you ever wished that you could be an NFL general manager? Well, now you can, thanks to Reality Sports Online, a powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. Reality Sports Online was designed by former NFL front office personnel and features a revolutionary free agency auction room which mimics actual NFL free agency, enabling owners to compete against each other to negotiate with and sign the NFL's top talent to single or multi-year contracts. The platform can host up to 32 teams and has tons of other cool features in addition to free agency, like a rookie draft, multiple team trades, franchise tag, injured reserve, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Seriously, I play in a Reality Sports Online league. It's awesome. I took over Evan Silva's team last year and had Allen Robinson, AJ Green, Amari Cooper, and had a ton of fun until I got knocked out of the semifinal round. So I personally very much endorse the platform, and you should test your general manager skills by visiting realitysportsonline.com and participating in a mock free agency auction for free today. If you like what you see, use the promo code BYB10 to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. Talking about podcasting, that's how you do a professional segue, everybody.
I was just about to say, man, that is one of the most overlooked difficult things about podcasting. Segues.
It really is.
And you talked about your team on Reality Sports League. Whew, it's a great thing. I hyped up Allen Robinson all off season. I mean, you must have been listening.
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. No comment. No, I mean it's great. It's good stuff. And that just, like I said, that comes from practice, and I'm still pretty terrible at it. So we're seeing how it goes. But Adam, I kind of want to ask you. Sort of we've talked a lot of positive stuff so far. Has there ever been any like negative experience that you had while you're kind of in progress chasing this sort of the dream job and everything that's ever like turned you off to the idea of this career path?
I guess one thing that kind of stood out was the fact that a lot of people, like, it's not really negative, right? It's more of just kind of what life, right? I see that I'm only 23, and when I was even younger, I was like, wow, I was writing when I was 19. Like, I'm probably not going to realistically get to where I want to be in a while. So that was kind of, it never stopped me at all from writing and doing anything like that. But everybody thinks about that stuff every now and then. Like, I'm sure professional football players, dudes that are like on the cusp or on the borderline of getting drafted or not getting drafted, right? So I think that's normal, but that was kind of one thing, just because I was so young. It seemed like it was so far away from happening, and it still very well could be, but it's really, I at this point, I really don't care. Like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because I love it. Like, to me, the reason I keep writing is because it's literally impossible for me to picture myself doing anything else.
Right. Yeah, I hear that for sure. And I'll say this to you and to other people, but I'm sure there are people that are your age or my age or maybe even younger that are listening to the podcast looking for that sort of inspiration. I felt the same way. Like, I mean, you're younger. You're about like, yeah, I mean, you're about the same age as I am. And I just got the job at NFL when I was 23. I'm 24 now. I'll be 25 in August, so you guys can send me presents then. It's youth is really, I think, like, while, and this is something I've said before on the podcast, I think I said it in Matthew Berry's episode, but I'll say it again. Like, Sigmund Bloom told me when I first met him at our first my first football guys Vegas retreat or whatever, he told me, he's like, you're going to get a lot of people that make fun of you for your age, but remember that they only do that because they're jealous of you. And like, you always use your age to your advantage before somebody uses it against you as a weakness. And I think that that's something that's, really inspiring by your story, because not only, I mean, of course, sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm so young, like this is going to take forever. But at the same time, you're so young, you have so much time,
Yeah, and I
and
think I think, and I've had people who are well into their position and have been as a full-time analyst, writer, podcaster, whatever, tell me that, wow, like you've started. So say I would email someone like 2 weeks ago. I was 23. I'm still 23. And I said, hey, I've been writing for 5, 6 years, whatever. Say it's hypothetical.
yeah,
They would, a lot of them would say, wow, that's really good that you started so young. Because you have so much, like I've learned so much already, and
hmm
I'm not even at a full-time position. So like I've learned, and this is just like a couple names, but Jamie Eisenberg and Dave Richard from CBS, they've been like, I've learned so much from them. Just reading from, you don't even have to talk to them. Just reading Matthew Berry alone is easy to learn stuff. Like you talked about, Sigmund Bloom is just a wealth of knowledge. Just so many people, and a lot of them would say the fact that you started so young is really, really promising, because you're getting all that exposure already. You're already getting all that experience. And for anybody, like anybody that's thinking about starting, the easiest and most basic advice I can give is literally just start.
yeah.
Just start. And it doesn't matter if you aren't writing for a website, make a blog. There's plenty. It's so easy to make blogs nowadays. Write on a piece of paper, write on a notebook, write on Microsoft Word. Like just honestly start.
Yeah, I think that is important, and that's what really led me to start doing it. Was that, I was like, yeah, I was 21 at the time, or 22. Yeah, I was 20. Yeah, I don't know. It's like, yeah, 22, 21 ish. And yeah, I was like, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it too. Like, so don't let your age be a deterrent to anybody listening out there. Like, it's an advantage. It gives you more time. And yeah, Adam, like you came in, like when like similar age, like with a lot more experience than I did. And that's probably a very powerful tool. It's key to just use the time that you have and realize that your youth is an advantage. Not to mention, like, the audience is only getting younger, and I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, the way that they consume media is the same way that we consume media. And that's another advantage too, that, you know, and I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody that's been on the podcast before, but like when the old dogs are learning new tricks, like, we're just doing what we do, and I think that that's important too. So I hope that nobody ever lets their age be a deterrent. It's not a big deal. So I know you're in school for journalism, right? I think we talked about that before, or in and out of school for journalism,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I'm in and out, to say the least. You know, I've I've taken a couple semesters, and then I would take a semester off for personal reasons or whatever. But
Right.
yeah, it's still on the table as well.
But do you think that, like, that perspective helps you? Because I've kind of always heard mixed emotions or mixed feelings about that in the industry. And like, I don't come from a journalism background at all. Like, that wasn't what I went to school for. This was not what I ever saw myself doing. But do you think that, like, is an advantage or helpful for you at all? Or would you encourage somebody, like, if they're going into college, or they're in college and they want to switch their degree or something like that, would you recommend that in order to do this as a career path?
I mean, honestly, it obviously doesn't hurt, right? I mean, if you have a degree in journalism, obviously that's beneficial just in life in general, just a degree in general. But obviously, if you're taking journalism classes, you're not writing about fantasy football for your essays. So just keep that in mind.
Right.
Yeah, I
It's a good
for
point.
me for me it was just the fact that I have always loved writing, so it was kind of the natural course for me, I guess, to kind of go on. Um, but if you're interested in it, I mean, I'm not going to advise against it for sure, because there are a lot of pluses to it. I mean, first of all, you're just getting practice writing.
Mhm.
That's the first thing. You expand your vocabulary, all this stuff to kind of make your writing less bland, I guess is a good way to put it. Um, so I think that's really something that you can look at if you're interested in that. I wouldn't say, oh, you want to be a sports writer, you want to be a movie critic writer, you want to be a video game writer. you have to take journalism classes or you will fail. Now, I don't think it's that black and white, but does it help? Absolutely. I mean, I can't really say it because I haven't gotten my degree or anything yet. I'm still in the process of that as well. But it's kind of helped because not only is it expanding your vocabulary, giving you different ways to write, it's also a good way because when I write about fantasy football, I don't really get writer's block just because it's natural for me. But when I write about just whatever that a random topic would be that I'm not passionate about, I get writer's block. So it's a kind of also a good way to combat that if you ever run into that kind of situation as well. But yeah, I definitely am not going to advise against it because there are a lot of pluses to it and a lot of benefits.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. All right, and I'm going to close. We're kind of winding down here, and I'm going to ask a question here that's going to make me feel like everybody's least favorite guidance counselor, or or like your annoying aunt after when you're about to graduate and they ask you this terrible question. But so Adam, you're kind of in progress right now, like you mentioned. Things are going very well for you. You're working for a lot of different sites. You got a good thing going with the podcast and DFS boot camp and everything like that. But you're still working towards something. And so my two-part question here is, sort of that, where do you see yourself, in 5 years, or what would a successful ending to this story look like for you? And then two, what's the most important step you're going to take in order to get there?
So the first question, where do I see myself in 5 years? Parading down Buffalo in a Super Bowl would probably be the correct answer.
Okay, but I mean like something that could actually happen.
I knew you were gonna say that. But yeah, honestly, it's a pretty basic answer, but I just want to be happy. And being happy is doing this, and it's pretty a simple equation, right? I'm happy when I'm writing about fantasy sports, talking about fantasy sports, talking with other people about fantasy sports. So I just want to have. I don't care if I make $10 really. Like I obviously I care. I'm not an idiot, but I just want to be doing what I love. And I know it's a kind of a cliche answer, but it's like if I'm working and I'm not knocking anybody who works at anywhere else, but that's just not for me. And I don't picture that for myself, and I don't want to picture that for myself. So 5 years from now, I'd love to be calling this my full-time job, like simple as that. But to get there, I honestly think I just have to keep doing what I'm doing. I mean, it's gotten me to some really good places. This will be my third year, I think, this summer writing for the Football Diehards magazine, which I thought was such a cool experience. I haven't really talked about, but something really cool to see kind of your name in print as opposed to online. But it's what I've been doing now has gotten me to some really interesting and fun places. So I honestly think if I add a little bit of kind of well-roundedness to what I'm doing already and just keep this mentality, I really do think I'll be all right. And there's plenty of people in the industry that I'm really close with that, I can look to for advice, and I continue to will because I don't care like if I'm 18 or 28, like I'm gonna keep picking all these people's brains. Like similar to like a rookie wide receiver comes in, he's playing. Let's say he's playing in Detroit before Calvin Johnson retired. I would just be continuously picking Calvin Johnson's brain. How can I get better? How can I do this? So I think it's kind of keeping that mindset that what you're doing isn't not working because you're not where you want to be yet. It's a process. And B, don't get content. I'm not even going to be content when I'm to where I want to be. Like I just want to keep picking people's brains and keep doing what I'm doing. And honestly, I think like I said, I think I'll be all right. So
yeah, I think that is really important, and like always learning. I mean, that's something that is key in this industry and life in general. But I mean that for me, like I don't care where I am or what I'm doing. I'm always, like you said, always going to be learning from the people that have been here before me, and even the people that will come after me. Like, if we hired somebody else at NFL like to write, for fantasy, I know that there would be a lot that I can learn from them. There's a lot I can learn from everybody that comes on this podcast, and there's a lot that I can learn from the people that listen to this podcast. Like that's very much like what I'm all about. Is like
and it's not even just other writers. It's like I've learned a lot from listeners and readers. Like I've learned a lot from them. So
for sure, like what they expect, what they like about your work and what they don't, and even just about,
And like,
just how to relate too.
oh, so they're not doing a podcast or writing like you are, so you're instantly smarter than them. Like these
Yeah, seriously.
these people that I connect with on Twitter and stuff, they are smart people. So, valuing what they think and valuing what their opinions are is almost as important as kind of what you value, I think. So, that's
I
another thing.
couldn't agree more with what you just said there. Like, just because somebody is a reader and we are the content creators does not mean that we're smarter than them, especially about something that's
Dude,
like,
I'm nothing. I don't.
oh yeah,
I get shocked when people tweet me or something. Like it doesn't happen a lot. Let's be honest. But when somebody randomly tweets me and says, "Wow, you're like one of my favorite people on Twitter to follow. I love your work." Like I legitimately get shocked because like
yeah, I
I'm not
agree.
I'm not anything. And then people have the idea like they tweet me, "Thank you for everything you do." Everything I do, like what I do, is nothing compared to half these people that I've just half the people in the world. Really, like I don't. What do I do? You know what I mean? So, but
Oh
it is
yeah.
it is a cool feeling to see people value your work. But at the end of the day, like, and I may be kind of like a little bit hot take here, but like I'm nothing right now. I'm just a guy. You know what I mean? Like just a guy doing what he likes to do. What's so different
Oh,
about?
no, but I totally agree. And like, I feel the same way, even coming from my perspective. Like, I'm like, why do 20,000 plus people follow me on Twitter or care what I have to say? Like, that's still the
I mean,
weirdest thing.
honestly, a good 17,000 are dog lovers.
Yeah,
Let's be
no,
honest,
for
but
sure.
no,
Most people are there for now. Well, now I've got a segment for that love the dog, and now I've got a little bit of plant Twitter. Hopefully, starting to follow me in
plant
that
Twitter.
regard. That's my new interest, gardening Twitter, that sort of thing. But yeah, no, I think that it is always it's good to keep that perspective though. That like you're just, and I tell people all the time like, well, just like especially with fantasy, because like that's just such a nebulous, like, who the hell, nobody really knows what the hell we're talking about. Like, when somebody tweets me like, "Hey, should I start this guy or this guy?" I'm like, well, what do you think? Like, your
That's
opinion is
exactly what I
valid
said.
too. Like, I mean, of course I answer start sit questions, and even though I don't particularly like to do it, like, I'm like, dude, well, what do you think? Like, you've been playing fantasy for a long time, like, right? You tell me. Like, I'm just another jackass. I said this on the last episode. Like, I'm just another
That's
jackass. Like,
exactly what I say. I'll say like somebody will ask me, should I start Lamar Miller or Thomas Rawls?
right? Like,
I'll literally say, well, I I like so and so, but who do you think is the better play? That's really all that matters.
yeah,
I'm not setting your lineup. So
this is
that's why
your
I think,
team.
yeah, exactly. So
And also, like, I think about the idea of like, well, thank you for all you do, and like, well, for one, for me, it's my job, and I have to eat and like pay rent, so I do it for that reason. But like, it's like this is something that Sigmund and I talk about a lot too. It's like it's like scratching my head, like I would be doing. It's like this is what I would be doing regardless, like
oh
like
yeah.
this is what I love doing. Like, so don't thank me. I'm just thank you for giving me a platform and paying attention. But all right, but Adam, we're kind of running low here on time, and I just want to I always do this for the guests, like before we get out of here, like give you one last chance to have the floor and say any parting thoughts either to the audience or conveying sort of any ideas, any advice or anything. The floor is yours right here before I yank it out from you for a second.
Yeah, I mean, really, I just want to thank you for having me. I think it was really helpful, not only for people listening, but for me.
Yeah.
I think I really kind of thought about what I've been saying, what we've been talking about in this episode, and it's kind of made me even more motivated, to be honest. So I think that's been really beneficial for me. And yeah, like I think what you're doing is really great because it's such a unique, podcast, and it really kind of helps. And I've seen a lot of people interested in it, not just people that also write, but like it's just kind of something to listen to that really makes you like get a different perspective on other people's lives and just stuff in general. So yeah, it was an honor to come on. I really appreciate it. I had fun.
Nah, man, for sure. And I think, to be honest with you, like I get motivated every time I have somebody on the show, and like I go
Yeah.
back and listen. Obviously, like I go back and listen to the podcast for like editorial purposes and like making sure everything is correct. But sometimes I listen and like I get lost in listening to your guys' stories again. So I always find this to be a very motivating thing, and I'm so glad that other people do too. And I really hope that that interest level continues. And in order for that to happen, like guys, definitely I appreciate everything you do, and I hate asking more of you, but of course, like if you could always, remember to rate and review the podcast on iTunes, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, tell your friends, like I said, I don't think this podcast is just for potential writers. I think it's become a lot more than that, and I'm very grateful. So, whatever you guys continue to do to grow the podcast only makes this thing better, only lets us keep doing it, and I really appreciate everything you guys do. So I want to thank you all for listening today, and I hope you learned something.